This Poké Radar tutorial will be all about resetting the radar optimally, which in my opinion is probably the most important aspect of radar chaining. So if you can make good sense of this, you will be well on your way to becoming a master chainer. If you haven't already, I would probably recommend watching my tutorial on edge patches first, as a lot of what I said in that video will be assumed knowledge for this one, but it probably isn't a huge deal. Okay, so while you should be aware that the route analysis document essentially tells you which are the most optimal tiles to reset your radar for each route, this video will focus more on how to go about determining what is optimal. And I'd always encourage people to come up with their own strategies for radar chaining in specific routes, and that it isn't necessary to follow my strategies. However, what is absolutely important is to have a strategy. Chaining without thinking about it and just resetting your radar at random tiles is always going to be very slow and inefficient, and you'll overall just be making things much more difficult for yourself than it needs to be. I repeat, it's important to have a strategy, but it's not necessary to follow my strategies. Okay, so I'm going to start by quoting something I said in my beginner tutorial, and that is, radar is all RNG and probabilities, and what we are really doing when radar chaining is trying to skew those probabilities in our favor as much as possible. And one of the best ways we can achieve that is by resetting our radar as optimally as possible in order to maximize our chance of spawning patches that have a high probability of continuing our chain. Okay, so here's how this works. Every time the radar is activated, the game generates 5 shaking patches in the 9x9 tile area around the tile you are standing, as follows, with 1 patch spawning in each zone, and the 5th patch spawning randomly in either Zone 1, Zone 2, or Zone 3. The patch we are most interested in when building chains is patch 4, spawning in the 4 zone, which, assuming it spawned as a fast shaker, has the highest probability of containing the chained Pokemon. Zone 4 is made up of 32 tiles represented by the red squares, meaning there is a 1 in 32 chance that patch 4 will generate on any one particular tile. If the tile the game picks is a grass tile, that patch will shake. If you keep resetting the radar right in the middle of this field of grass where the entire spawnable area falls on grass, you will always see exactly 1 of these 32 red tiles shake every reset. If we were to reset the radar where we are right now, for example, this is Route 14. Now only 16 out of 32 4-zone tiles are grass, so only half of the time will you see patch 4 shake. The other half of the time, patch 4 will be generating on one of these grassless tiles and therefore not really exist, so you won't see it. So when we reset the radar when building our chain, our objective should be to maximize the number of grass tiles in Zone 4. Hence maximizing that patch 4 will generate on a grass tile. However, there is one other factor we need to take into consideration, which is edge patch risk. Because enclosed patches are safer options than edge patches, we generally want to reset such that the majority of Zone 4 doesn't fall on the very edge of the field. So for every reset tile recommendation, the document will provide information of how optimal it is to reset there. So here you will notice I'm specifically using the language not unsafe edge instead of just not edge. The reason for this is that not all edge patches are equal, so there is no good reason to be classifying all edge patches as a risk. Some edge patches only have like a 1 in 1,000 chance of breaking your chain. That's not a risk. Calling that a risk is silly. I figure you need to draw the line somewhere, and I've decided to arbitrarily put it at 1%. So I define a safe edge as one that has a less than 1% chance of breaking your chain, and an unsafe edge is one that has a greater than 1% chance of breaking your chain. And just to be clear, this 1% distinction is completely arbitrary and totally meaningless. The only reason why it is somewhat important is because I use it as a basis to identify optimal reset tiles, and I include the safe edges in this number. So for this reset tile at Route 14, for example, the 9 grass tiles here are made up of these 8 enclosed patches, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And this safe edge here, and if you look at the edge patch analysis in the top right, you'll see that this edge here does calculate to under 1%. It is actually 0.70% chance of breaking your chain. So I classify this as a safe edge. So I include that in this number. So probably the most useful stat to know is the odds of spawning an ideal patch. So I'm defining an ideal patch as a 4-zone fast shaker that is not on an unsafe edge. And this is a pretty simple calculation to make. Dividing the number of 4-zone grass tiles not unsafe edge by 32 will give you the odds patch 4 will spawn on a safe grass tile. But obviously it's not always guaranteed to spawn as a fast shaker. It turns out patch 4 is actually quite a bit more likely to spawn as a fast shaker than a medium shaker, and it can never spawn as a slow shaker. After extensive testing, I've concluded it to be approximately 70-30 fast medium for patch 4, although a recent data mine seemed to suggest that the odds are closer to 80-20, but it doesn't really matter too much. It's just an approximation. I have the squiggly line here for a reason. The odds are going to be somewhere in this range. So in this case, patch 4 has a 9 out of 32 chance of spawning on a safe grass tile, and if it does spawn on one of those tiles, it has approximately a 70% chance of spawning as a fast shaker, and taking all of that into consideration, the odds of spawning an ideal patch at this tile calculates to be about 20% or 1 in 5 resets on average. We're going to use Route 2 here as an example to go through the process of determining which is the optimal tile to reset when building our chain. Remember, we are trying to get these numbers as high as possible, which will allow us to chain at maximum efficiency and reliability. So first we're going to try resetting right in the middle of the field, so here. So here the number of 4-zone grass tiles is 12. But all 12 of them fall on edges, and because none of these are safe edges and they all calculate to above 1%, this number is a 0, and therefore the odds of spawning an ideal patch is 0%. So if our goal is to try and spawn safe patches to build our chain, resetting here is going to be pretty useless, as any patch that spawns from resetting at this tile will be risky. Okay, so now let's try resetting a bit off from the middle, so here. So now we have 4 tiles from the top edge and 4 tiles from the right and left edges. So here is a little bit better. We've increased this number from a 12 to a 19. So now we have a few more decent options to work with overall. However, all of the 4-zone grass tiles still fall on unsafe edges. So this number is still a 0, and the odds of spawning an ideal patch is still 0%. Now let's try resetting here. So now we have 5 tiles from the top edge and 5 tiles from the right edge. And while the number of 4-zone grass tiles has dropped from 19 to 13, now 11 of them are on enclosed patches. And the odds of spawning an ideal patch is approximately 24% per reset. So resetting at this tile is optimal for Route 2, and it's what I recommend in the document. You can't get this number to be any higher than an 11 here. Reset here as much as possible, and you will be chaining at maximum efficiency and reliability. So resetting 5 tiles from 2 edges is generally optimal. It's generally the sweet spot, especially for rectangular shaped fields of grass. If we were to reset 5 tiles from the top edge, and 6 tiles from the right edge. So here, for example, as you can see, it's a little less optimal. We've lost a 4 zone patch to work with, so this number is now at 10. If your field of grass is too small to be able to reset 5 tiles away from 2 edges without needing to reset on an edge, it's generally going to be a pretty slow and tedious place to chain. So resetting here is optimal if you want to maximize efficiency and reliability, but what if you would rather maximize efficiency but don't mind throwing reliability out the window? If you just want speed, it can sometimes be worth resetting a bit closer to the middle. So if we try resetting here again, where we are 4 tiles away from the top edge and the right and left edge, here we've maximized the number of 4 zone grass tiles. We have more 3 zone grass tiles to work with as well. And overall increase the number of grass tiles in the spawnable area, so we will get a lot of patches shaking when resetting here. So we will have more options to work with, allowing to build our chain faster. But because no safe options can spawn, we will have to play risky and YOLO edges and close patches. So an effective strategy is to use this as your reset tile early chain to quickly increase your chain length, and then you can switch to resetting here once your chain has reached a reasonable length and you no longer want to take as many risks. This strategy may not be for everyone, but you can certainly do that if you want to. Returning to Route 14 for a bit, covering taking edge patch risk into consideration when choosing reset tiles in a bit more depth. So the reason why I recommend resetting here at Route 14, as opposed to say here, which is also a very decent option, is primarily because the edge patches are overall safer along Zone 4. So if we reset here, this 4 zone grass tile is on a 3.3% edge, and this one is on a 6% edge. Whereas in this case, this 4 zone grass tile is now on a 2.8% edge, and this one is now on a far safer edge and is under 1%, meaning according to my safe edge patch definition, this number now increases from an 8 to a 9, and the odds of spawning an ideal patch is now approximately 20% as opposed to 18%. In addition, there is an extra 4 zone grass tile down here as well, so this number now increases from a 15 to a 16, giving you an extra option to work with. This tile does now fall on a slightly riskier edge though, so the edge patch risk here is now 3.1% as opposed to 1.5% in this case, but that is a pretty negligible point compared to everything else. So in this case, it is more optimal to reset 6 tiles from the right edge instead of 5 tiles from the right edge. So this may seem pretty minor, and it is, but minor tweaks to your reset tile strategy can make a noticeable difference to your chaining efficiency. Next thing I'm going to discuss is resetting on edges. Obviously, since every time you reset on an edge, there is a chance that your chain may just break, there are very rarely any situations where this is a good idea. Even if you can get these numbers to be way higher by resetting on an edge, it's still generally not worth the risk of your chain just instantly breaking. For example, here at Route 19, the highest we can get this number is a 5, but if we now reset on this edge, this number is now a 9, and therefore the odds of spawning an ideal patch increases from approximately 11% to now 20%. And the overall number of 4 zone grass tiles also increases, giving us even more options. However, gaining better odds to spawn good patches isn't at all worth risking this 1 out of 68 chance that your chain may just break every reset. And I may reset here a few times early chain, but I wouldn't push my luck any more than that. Having said that, It can sometimes be a perfectly fine idea to reset your radar on an edge, provided it is optimal and the edge in question is very safe. So at this grass field at Route 20 around the Moss Rock here, the numbers are 12 and 16 if we reset at this tile. But if we now reset directly adjacent to the Moss Rock, so here, the numbers now increase to 17 and 21, which is quite a bit more optimal. And the odds of spawning an ideal patch now increases from approximately 26% to 37%. And the odds of breaking your chain resetting at this tile is only around 1 in 773 each reset, which is pretty negligible. So I'd say it's perfectly fine to reset here for at least the first half of your chain. I've actually manually reset here a lot before, and I have never seen it break my chain. But it is probably best to switch your reset tile back to here once you reach a higher chain length, as there is no reason to risk it at that point. Last topic to discuss is resetting for shiny patches. If you are resetting the radar to try and spawn a shiny patch, like if you're at a 40 chain or during fast music, then the rules are different. These three stats are largely irrelevant when resetting for shiny patch. We don't particularly care about spawning ideal patches, and it doesn't really matter if the shiny patch spawns on an edge. The only stat that really matters is this one, the odds of spawning a shiny patch at a 40 chain. Resetting to maximize shiny patch odds is simple enough. You want to reset such that you maximize the number of grass tiles in the spawnable area, which is generally accomplished by resetting close to the middle of the field. This will maximize the number of patches that shake each reset, hence maximizing the odds that a shiny patch will show up. So changing our reset tile from here to right in the middle of the field here increases the number of grass tiles in the spawnable area from 45 to 60, and the odds of spawning a shiny patch from approximately 1 in 83 to 1 in 63 per reset. If you want to know more about how the shiny patch odds in Gen 6 work and how I actually go about running this calculation, I'd suggest watching my radar science video on shiny patch odds. But it turns out that it doesn't seem to be too relevant whether you reset right in the middle or slightly off from the middle like this. The odds of spawning a shiny patch at these three reset tiles are all around 1 in 63 per reset. And just to demonstrate this further, if we try expanding the answer out to more decimal places, so this is the calculation for resetting right in the middle of the field, so the odds of spawning a shiny patch at a 40 chain is about 1.601 per reset, and slightly off from the middle, the answer is about 1.599% per reset. So it is theoretically very slightly more optimal to reset right in the middle, but this is a negligible point. As long as you actually have the maximum number of grass tiles in the spawnable area, you should have close to maximum odds. Some final points to conclude this video. I did recommend in my beginner tutorials to pick one tile, and every time you need to reset your radar, do it at that tile as much as practically possible. And that is definitely a very simple and effective way to chain, but it isn't the only way to play, and as you chain more you can start to introduce some more complex reset tile strategies. The main point is, there should always be a good reason for the tile you choose to reset your radar. Never reset somewhere for no reason. Try to visualize the spawnable area around certain tiles and think to yourself, what is the best option for the situation I am currently in and what I am trying to achieve? Hopefully this video was informative. Thanks for watching.